The sun spilled gold over the sleepy town of Maple Ridge, the kind of town where everyone knew the mailman's route and the grocery clerk's birthday. Tucked between old oaks and faded picket fences was a bench on Rosehill Avenue where time seemed to slow down just enough to notice the important things, like the way two little girls sat quietly, their lunch boxes unopened, their eyes fixed on the world as if waiting for a miracle they didn't dare ask for. Dressed in hand-me-down sweaters to sizes too big, their knees swinging just above the sidewalk, the twins looked like echoes of each other. Same soft curls tied in mismatched ribbons, same scraped elbows, same kind of stillness that only children who have waited too long for something carry in their bones. They weren't in a hurry. People who are used to being forgotten never are. But across the street, life didn't seem to notice. Horns honked. A mother ushered her toddler out of a minivan with ballet shoes dangling from her wrist. A man in a navy suit argued on his Bluetooth while checking his watch. In the middle of it all stood a tall figure, alone and unmoving, as if time had paused just for him. His name was Julian. Heart. To the world, Julian was a headline. Tech visionary turned silent philanthropist, the genius who disappeared. They wrote stories about how he sold his cybersecurity company for $500 million and then walked away without so much as a press release. No one knew why. Theories ranged from burnout to betrayal. But the truth was simpler and sadder. Julian didn't know who he was when he wasn't building something, and when the applause stopped, he realized he didn't know how to hear silence. He hadn't meant to come back to Maple Ridge. It was a place filled with dusty memories and unopened boxes. But grief makes strange decisions for people, and when his mother passed unexpectedly, he inherited her home, her porch, and her quiet. Today was supposed to be simple, a walk, fresh air, maybe a moment of clarity. Instead, he found two pairs of eyes watching him like he was important, like he mattered, like they already knew something he didn't. He would have kept walking, except one of them, bolder, braver, stood up, dusted off her skirt, and waved. "Mister," she called out. "Are you a dad?" Julian blinked. The question cut through him, unexpected. He looked left and right to see if she meant someone else. "No one was nearby me," he asked, pointing to himself. The quieter twin tugged her sister's sleeve. "You can't just ask people that." "Why not?" the bolder one replied. "Mom says sometimes the people who help you aren't the ones you expect." Julian crossed the street slowly, hands in pockets, curiosity pulling him forward. "I'm not a dad," he said when he reached them, his voice softer than he meant. "Oh," the bold one said, disappointment folding her shoulders. "That's okay. You look like one." He laughed gently. "I'm not sure what that means," she shrugged. "Like, you look like you'd be good at it. Not the yelling kind. The clapping kind, you know, at school events." Julian sat on the edge of the bench, keeping a respectful distance. "I'm Julian," he said, as if offering a piece of himself. "I'm Ellie," said the bold one, "and this is my sister, Emma. We're 8. Our birthday was in March." Emma gave a shy wave. "Happy very late birthday," Julian said. The air sat still between them for a moment, until Ellie leaned forward and asked, "Do you have a family?" Julian hesitated. He thought about the voicemail he hadn't returned from his father, the siblings he hadn't spoken to in years, the empty house filled with furniture that wasn't his. "Not really," he said honestly. Ellie nodded, as if that made him more qualified in some strange, unspoken way. "Family day is Friday," she said, almost casually. "Everyone brings someone, like a mom or dad or grandma. But Mom can't come," Emma whispered, staring down at her shoes. Julian looked at their worn backpacks, the lunch boxes, the stickers starting to peel off. He didn't ask why. He didn't need to. "She works the morning shift at the diner," Ellie explained, "and the night shift at the motel. She said maybe next year. But last year, she said maybe next year, too." Emma opened her lunchbox, revealing a peanut butter sandwich, a bruised apple, and a folded napkin with a heart drawn in blue ink. Julian's chest tightened. "She always draws hearts, so we remember she loves us," Emma said quietly. "Even when she's not there." Ellie reached into her backpack and pulled out a crumpled flyer. "Family Day." Friday, 9 a.m. You don't have to really be our dad. Just sit there. Maybe smile. We're singing a song. It's about stars. Julian stared at the paper. He could have made a polite excuse. He could have said he was busy. He could have walked away. But he didn't. Why me? He asked. Ellie tilted her head. Because you look like you needed a reason to stay. That sentence stayed with him longer than it should have. Julian stood, folding the flyer and slipping it into his coat pocket. I'll think about it. People always say that, Emma said, almost to herself. I don't, Julian replied. Not when it matters. They smiled, the kind of smile that's more hope than joy. The kind that dares to believe something might change. As he walked away, he glanced over his shoulder. They were still sitting on the bench, watching him, not pleading, not begging, just waiting with the kind of patience only children understand. The kind that believes the world still has room for good surprises. Back at his mother's house, Julian sat on the porch steps, flyer in hand. He could hear the echo of Ellie's voice. You look like you needed a reason to stay. And for the first time in a long while, he wondered if she was right. Somewhere inside him, something small shifted. Not a breakthrough, not yet, but a crack of light through years of walls. He had come home for closure. Maybe he'd found a beginning instead. Friday, 9 a.m. He wouldn't forget. Not this time. Not when it mattered. Rain fell gently over Maple Ridge that Thursday night, tapping against window panes like a lullaby, soft and steady. Julian sat in his late mother's study, surrounded by books she had underlined, sticky notes tucked in their spines like old secrets. The flyer from Ellie still lay beside his keyboard, slightly damp at the edges. Family Day, 9 a.m. Friday. He should have thrown it away by now. That was the logical thing to do, but there it sat, like a whisper he couldn't ignore. He hadn't slept much, not because of the flyer, or the girls, or the question Ellie had asked. Not really, but because something inside him had stirred. For the first time in years, and it didn't want to go back to sleep. He used to be someone with a calendar full of pitch meetings, investor calls, launch dates, every hour scheduled, every moment accounted for. Now, he was someone who stared at a child's crayon drawing of a star printed on cheap paper and wondered what kind of man he had become. Friday morning came too quickly. He put on a button-up shirt that hadn't been worn in months and ran a hand through his hair, glancing at his reflection. He didn't look like anyone's dad, but maybe that wasn't the point. At Savannah Creek Elementary, a line of cars wrapped around the school parking lot. Banners reading Family Day Celebration fluttered in the breeze. Laughter spilled from the gymnasium windows, bright and bubbling. Julian hesitated at the front doors. It had been decades since he'd walked into a school gym. He hadn't expected the lump in his throat. Memories flooded in his own mother clapping wildly from the back row at his 5th grade science fair. Even though she didn't understand what he'd built, she showed up. That's what mattered. He stepped inside. Rows of metal folding chairs filled the gym. On the stage, a group of children in paper crowns lined up nervously. A woman with a clipboard and a high ponytail scurried back and forth. Parents chatted softly, many holding their phones in anticipation. Some wore suits, others jeans. All of them wore the same expression, pride. Julian felt wildly out of place, until two voices pierced the noise. He came. Ellie's whisper was urgent and bright. Emma grinned, waving both hands in the air as if her whole world had just aligned. They wore matching dresses, wrinkled, but carefully chosen and tiny. Glitter sneakers. A small purple hairbow was lopsided on Emma's head. They looked like magic. Julian raised a hand in greeting, unsure what else to do. He hadn't even brought flowers. Should he have brought flowers? What did one bring to? Something like this, Mr. Hart, came a voice from behind. He turned to find a tall woman with tired eyes and kind hands. She held a serving tray with half-eaten muffins. I'm Tori, she said. I work with Ivy, the twins' mom. She told me about you. Or, rather, they did. You're here for them. Julian nodded, suddenly self-conscious. Tori smiled. They haven't stopped talking about you since Tuesday. Don't worry, Ivy knows. She called me from the kitchen this morning in tears. Said she couldn't get off work, but prayed you'd come. He swallowed the lump again. They asked me to. "Then you did the right thing," she said, patting his shoulder. "Come on, they saved you a seat in the front." He followed her through the rows of parents until he found a tiny paper signs taped to metal chairs. One read Jade and Daisy in child handwriting. The other read Special Guest. He sat down. The lights dimmed. The music started. And then the girls sang. It wasn't perfect. Ellie sang aloud, and Emma missed the second verse, but they shined more than any spotlight could make them. They scanned the crowd, eyes searching until they found him, and when they did, they smiled like he was the only person in the world who mattered. He clapped. He didn't stop clapping. After the show, parents gathered for cookies and juice. Kids dragged their families to meet their teachers. Ellie and Emma ran straight to him, holding hands. "You came," Ellie beamed. "You really came," Emma echoed. "I said I would," Julian replied, kneeling down. "You two were incredible," Ellie shrugged. "We practiced in the hallway every day." "Did you see Emma twirl?" Ellie whispered proudly. "I did," Julian smiled. "Very professional twirling." Emma blushed and hid behind her sister. Julian felt something strange then, not sadness, not obligation, something warmer, gentler, a kind of quiet belonging, as if the space he didn't know existed inside him was finally filling. From across the gym, a woman in a diner uniform stepped through the doors, breathless. Ivy Harper. Her apron was dusted with flour, and exhaustion lined her face. But her eyes were full of something else: hope, worry, and deep, aching love. The moment she spotted her daughters, she ran. They saw her and screamed in unison, "Mama." They ran too and collided in a hug that stole every word from the room. Julian watched, unsure if he should disappear or wait. He chose to wait. When Ivy looked up and met his eyes, her expression shifted. She straightened, smoothing her apron and wiping her hands on a napkin. "I'm sorry I couldn't be here," she said, walking over. "I tried to swap shifts, but no one could cover. I didn't know they'd actually ask someone." "They were very convincing," Julian said, offering a small smile. She nodded slowly, biting her lip. "They don't usually talk to strangers." "They weren't strangers," he replied gently. "Not really. I appreciate what you did. I hope they didn't pressure you." "No pressure," he said. "Just a couple of very persuasive girls who reminded me that sometimes we get invitations in life we're not supposed to ignore." Ivy looked at him more closely then, not like someone sizing him up, but like someone trying to understand a moment that didn't quite make sense. A stranger who'd shown up, sat in a folding chair, clapped like he meant it, and didn't ask for anything in return. "Thank you," she whispered. Julian nodded. Then Ellie tugged his sleeve. "Can we show you something?" He followed them into the hallway, past the trophy case and the art wall. They stopped in front of a poster made of construction paper and glitter glue. "Our class made a dream board," Emma said, pointing. "Mine says I want to be an artist." Ellie beamed. "Mine says I want to be a helper, like you." Julian blinked. "I'm a helper," Emma nodded seriously. "You came when you didn't have to." He looked at their poster boards, then at them, and for a fleeting second, the noise of the world faded. That night, back at his mother's house, Julian sat on the porch with a cup of tea. No bourbon, no distractions, just the silence he used to dread. Only this time, it didn't feel empty, because now it held something, to voices, to smiles, two little hands tugging at his sleeve and pointing at stars. He hadn't planned for any of it, but maybe life wasn't always about plans. Maybe it was about recognizing the unexpected invitations, the ones that ask nothing, but mean everything. And maybe, just maybe, it wasn't the end of something anymore. Maybe it was the beginning. The sky over Maple Ridge stretched wide and cloudless the morning after Family Day. But Ivy Harper stood at her kitchen sink staring into a chipped mug of cooling coffee, unable to feel the warmth in the sun outside. Her hands, raw from scrubbing tables and folding laundry, gripped the mug like it was the only steady thing left. Her heart still hadn't caught up to what had happened yesterday. He showed up. A stranger. A man she didn't know. A man her daughters had pulled from thin air like a miracle. And not just any man, a man with presence. A man who stood out. She'd seen him from across the gym and felt it immediately. Like the room had shifted without asking her permission. Tall, steady, sad eyes that seemed like they'd seen a world she couldn't imagine, but kind in the way that made her daughters feel safe. Safe enough to ask for the one thing she hadn't been able to give them, a father. Ivy placed the mug down and leaned against the counter. She had barely gotten out a thank you. She'd meant to say more, maybe explain herself, maybe apologize for the boldness of her girls, maybe not. What could she have said? That she was barely holding it together, that most nights she counted quarters before counting sheep, that being both mom and dad wasn't just exhausting, it was slowly hollowing her out. She had lived her whole life knowing some people got chapters while others got footnotes. But Ellie and Emma, her bright, beautiful, sunbeam-hearted daughters, they deserved better than footnotes. And now the stranger, Julian, had stepped into their story like a missing line of poetry she hadn't known was gone. Later that morning, the girls sat cross-legged on the living room floor, sketching stars and stick figures in their notebooks. "Do you think he'll come back?" Ellie asked, not looking up. Emma kept coloring. "He said he would think about it." "Thinking usually means no," Emma shrugged. "But he clapped, like really clapped, not the fake kind." They were quiet a moment before Ellie spoke again. "Maybe we could invite him over, just to say thank you." Their mom was behind them, folding laundry on the worn-out couch, trying not to let her face betray how much those words unsettled her. Julian had done something beautiful, but she couldn't afford hope, not the fragile kind that looked like help. Help, in her world, often came with strings, and she was already tangled in too many knots still. When the girls handed her a note later that afternoon written in their best block letters, sealed with a smiley face sticker, she didn't say no. She just whispered, "Be careful with your hearts, girls." Julian found the note tucked in his mailbox late that evening. The envelope was small, crumpled slightly at the edges. Inside was a piece of lined paper that read, "Dear Mr. Julian, thank you for coming to Family Day. You made it special. If you're not busy, would you like to have dinner with us on Saturday? It's spaghetti. Mom makes it with extra love. If you can't come, that's okay. We just wanted to say thank you. Your friends Ellie and Emma Press. We made dessert to Julian." Read it twice. Then again. Something in his chest tightened in a way he wasn't used to. Not painful but unfamiliar. There was a time when invitations meant galas and red carpets. Back when his name sat on Forbes lists and venture capitalists flew cross-country just to shake his hand. Now, all he had was a quiet town, an old porch, and a note written in crayon. And it was the only invitation that had meant anything in years. He showed up with a bouquet of wildflowers. He wasn't sure if that was appropriate, but it felt right. When Ivy opened the door, her eyes widened just slightly before she stepped aside to let him in. The apartment was small, but warm. Laughter echoed from the hallway where the girls were getting ready. The walls were covered with school art projects, drawings of unicorns, stars, and a crooked paper heart labeled "Our Family." Julian handed her the flowers. "These are for you and your daughters." She hesitated, then took them. "You didn't have to bring anything." "I wanted to." Dinner was simple, spaghetti and garlic bread, with cupcakes for dessert. Ellie talked the most, spinning stories about school, her dream of becoming a vet, and how she once tried to fix a ladybug's broken wing. Emma listened, smiling shyly, only chiming in when she had something important to add. Ivy mostly stayed quiet, listening, watching. Julian noticed her taking in every word the girls said, storing them like treasure. He wondered how often she got to be still like this, how often she let herself breathe without watching the clock. After dinner, the girls pulled out a board game with missing pieces. They insisted he play, and he did badly on purpose, just to make them laugh later. When the girls were brushing their teeth and getting ready for bed, Ivy stepped onto the small balcony with Julian. The air smelled like laundry and city trees. She held a mug in her hand, but it had gone cold. "They haven't stopped talking about you since Tuesday," she said. "There's something else." He replied, "They are." She agreed, then paused. "I wasn't sure you'd come." "I wasn't sure either." He looked out over the quiet street. "It's been a long time since anyone invited me to something that didn't involve press or profit." Ivy glanced at him. "You don't owe them anything. I know. They've been let down before. I won't be one of them." The words came out before he could measure them, but he meant them. He didn't know what this was becoming. He didn't know where it would lead. But what he did know deep in the marrow of his bones was that he wanted to show up. That something, in Ellie's bright eyes and Emma's quiet smile, had begun stitching him back together, inside. The girls giggled over bedtime stories. Ivy sighed. "They've been sleeping in the same bed lately," she said. "Nightmares. About being left." Julian looked at her. "They're not the only ones." She met his gaze for a moment longer than comfort allowed, then looked away. "I'm just trying to do my best. You're doing more than that." She didn't reply, but the corner of her mouth tugged upward just a little. Before he left that night, the girls gave him a hand-drawn card. On the front was a picture of 3 stick figures, 2 little girls, 1 tall man in the middle. Above them, the words, "You make us feel not so invisible." He carried the card in his coat pocket all the way home. And that night, for the first time in years, he slept. The knock came just after sunset on a Wednesday, when Ivy was in the middle of folding laundry, and the girls were on the floor building a castle, out of cereal boxes and crayons. The sound startled her not because it was loud, but because no one knocked at this hour. In her world, people didn't drop by unannounced unless something was wrong. She opened the door slowly, wiping her hands on her jeans, and there he was again. Julian, holding a book, one with a worn leather cover and gold-trimmed pages. Not a gift, not flowers, just a book. "Hi," he said softly. I thought maybe I could read to them tonight." Ivy stared at him for a beat, uncertain whether to laugh, cry, or just step aside. She didn't know what rule book they were playing from anymore, or if there even was one. But before she could answer, Ellie's voice called from the living room. "Is that Mr. Julian?" Emma peeked around the corner, her eyes already lighting up. That was her answer. He read 3 chapters that night, one from a fantasy novel the girls adored, voices and all. Emma snuggled into a pillow, eyes wide as he narrated the tale of a brave orphan who saved a kingdom. Ellie corrected his pronunciation once. He took it well. Afterward, when the girls were finally in bed, Ivy sat with him on the balcony again. The silence between them was easier now, like they'd made peace with the space they didn't need to fill. "You didn't have to come tonight," she said. "I wanted to." "Do you always show up when people need something?" "No," he admitted. "Not always, but I'm trying to be the kind of person who does." She looked at him carefully, as if trying to figure out where that kind of person had been hiding. Then she asked the question that had been resting on the tip of her tongue for days. "Why us?" Julian looked down at his hands, then out at the city beyond the railing. "Because I was going through life with everything except the one thing I actually needed. I didn't know what it was until I saw those girls sitting alone after school. And then suddenly I did." Ivy's throat tightened. She had spent years building walls, layering them with jobs and chores and reasons why she couldn't afford softness. But here was this man, walking gently into her life, not tearing the walls down but sitting quietly beside them, waiting for her to open the door. He didn't ask for anything. That made it harder. Later that week, something unexpected happened. The girls came home from school with news they were invited to a classmate's birthday party, one with balloons and pizza and a rented magician. But there was a catch. It cost $15 each to attend. That night, Ivy stood in the kitchen, holding the permission slip in one hand and a stack of unpaid bills in the other. She didn't even have to do the math. The answer was always the same. There wasn't enough. She hated what came next. She crouched beside the girls and said, "I know you were really looking forward to the party, but Mommy can't." "It's okay," Emma said quickly, eyes to the floor. Ellie forced a smile. "We can have our own party. Maybe we can rent a magician later, when we're millionaires." They weren't upset. That made it worse. They were used to disappointment. Julian found out 2 days later, not because they told him, but because Emma accidentally mentioned it while coloring. He didn't ask for permission. He just showed up on Saturday with balloons in one hand and 2 pizza boxes in the other. They stared at him like he'd just descended from a rainbow. "What's all this?" Ivy asked, blinking. "Birthday party, kind of. Makeup edition." He shrugged. "But it's no one's birthday," Ivy said. Maybe it's just a party to celebrate. Joy, he replied. She wanted to argue, but the girls had already screamed and disappeared to change into sparkly dresses. That day, their tiny apartment was filled with laughter and frosting and glitter that would never fully come. Out of the carpet, Julian taught them how to make balloon animals from a YouTube video. Emma made a purple dog with 3 legs. Ellie made a sword and demanded a duel. Ivy watched from the doorway, a dish towel in her hands, and something unfamiliar building in her chest. Not panic, not fear, not even hope, something quieter, deeper. Peace. After the girls went to bed, Julian stayed behind to help clean up. They stood in the kitchen, rinsing paper plates and tossing streamers. You didn't have to do this, Ivy said softly. I know. She looked at him, then really looked. Are you this kind with everyone? No, he said, just with the people who make me feel like I'm not wasting my life. Ivy swallowed hard. Then, barely above a whisper, she asked, What are you doing, Julian? He met her gaze, steady. I don't know, but I know I feel more like myself here than I ever did in any office or penthouse. She leaned against the counter. They're getting attached. I know, and so am I. His voice didn't waver. Good. She closed her eyes for a moment. I can't promise you anything, she said. We're a mess, some weeks. We're one flat tire away from disaster, and I've been on my own a long time. I don't know how to let people in without worrying they'll leave. I'm not leaving, he said. Not unless you ask me to. Ivy nodded, barely. I'm not asking. That night, when he walked home under a sky full of stars, he felt something he hadn't felt in years, a pull, not ambition, not obligation. Belonging. He had come to Maple Ridge to settle his mother's estate. He had stayed out of guilt, out of grief, out of a sense of unfinished endings. But now, he stayed for something else entirely, to little girls who had once asked him to clap for them, and a woman who was finally learning how to trust again. They weren't a family, not yet, but they were beginning to feel like one. It started with a headline. Julian was at the grocery store early on a quiet Monday morning, pushing a cart filled with pancake mix, bananas, and the kind of cereal with a cartoon animal on the box, something he never would have touched 6 months ago. But now, he knew Ellie liked the marshmallows, and Emma preferred the corn shapes. He had learned their preferences the way one learns a song by heart without trying. He was standing at the checkout when a newspaper on the rack caught his eye. Reclusive tech mogul spotted in small town. Is Julian Hart hiding out? A blurry photo on the front page showed him leaving Ivy's apartment building, a plastic grocery bag in one hand and Ellie's glittery backpack slung over the other. Shoulder. His chest tightened. He didn't remember anyone taking that photo. He didn't know who leaked it, but now it was out. His past, the fortune, the fame. The pressure had come roaring back into a world he was trying so hard to keep quiet, simple, human. By the time he reached Ivy's door, the article had already gone viral. He knocked. Once, twice. When she opened it, she didn't smile. Her phone was in her hand, the article glowing on the screen. They know who you are now, she said. Julian exhaled slowly. I didn't want it to happen like this. They're calling you the billionaire dad, she added, her voice unreadable. They're saying you bought your way into some small-town fairy tale. His jaw clenched. That's not what this is. I know, she said, softer this time, but the world doesn't. The girls came running to the door a moment later, oblivious. You brought pancake mix, Ellie squealed. And the good kind. Emma hugged his waist. You remembered the syrup too, but Ivy's eyes lingered on his. What happens now? He didn't have an answer, not yet. Later that day, Ivy walked to work with a scarf wrapped around her head and sunglasses shielding her face. Still, people stared. Not with cruelty, at least not yet, but with curiosity. Whispered questions followed her through the aisles of the diner, past the coffee pots and clinking silverware. Is that her? Is that the woman with the twins? What's he doing with her? Julian tried to shield them from it, but the world had a way of squeezing into the cracks. He met Ivy on her break, standing by the alley out back behind the Buttered Biscuit Cafe. I can fix this, he said. How? She asked. You can't erase the internet. I can make a statement. Tell them to back off. She shook her head. And make it worse. Then it's not just a story, it's a fight. They'll want more. They'll start digging. He knew she was right, and still it made him feel helpless. I never wanted this for you, he said quietly. I didn't mean to bring a storm into your peace. She looked at him then, really looked. You didn't. You brought light. But now the storm's here, and I need to know you're not going to run from it. He straightened. I'm not running. She nodded, but her hands still trembled as she lit a cigarette she wouldn't smoke. Just to keep them steady. The next day, Ellie came home from school quieter than usual. Julian noticed it right away. What's wrong? He asked gently. She fiddled with her shoelaces. A boy in my class said I only have cool shoes now because you're rich. He said we're not really a family. Julian knelt down, his heart fracturing at the edges. What did you say? I told him families are who show up, she said firmly, not who pays for stuff. Julian blinked, then pulled her into a hug. You're right. You're absolutely right. But that night, when the girls were asleep, he sat on the porch with Ivy and told her everything. About how he made his first million at 20-3. About the company that grew too fast. The headlines that never stopped. The loneliness that followed. Him even in crowds of people who cheered for him. About the woman he almost married. Who left because she said she wanted a man, not a machine built for success. And about his mother, who died alone while he was stuck in a boardroom, trying to land a deal he doesn't even remember now. I came here because I was trying to disappear. He said. You didn't disappear, Ivy said. You just found the version of you that matters. He nodded, slowly. I think I like him better. Me too, she said. For a moment, the night felt still again. But peace is fragile, and it rarely comes without a test. That weekend, a man showed up at the diner, suit, tie, cold eyes. He didn't order coffee. He didn't sit down. He handed Ivy a card with a logo she recognized from the news. We represent Mr. Kendrick Shaw, the man said, a longtime rival of Mr. Hart. Ivy's stomach turned. He'd like to offer a very generous donation to your daughter's school. Scholarships, grants in exchange for a short interview. Nothing invasive, just your experience, your story. Ivy stared at the card. You want me to sell my story? The man smiled politely. Your truth, Ms. Harper. People love a good underdog narrative. A tech billionaire, a single mom. To sweet girls, it's inspiring. She handed the card back without a word and walked away. Julian heard about it the same night. He paced the living room, fists clenched. This is exactly what I didn't want. They're turning your life into clickbait. Ivy didn't argue, but she didn't back down either. They can write what they want, she said, as long as you and I know what's real. He looked at her then, something burning in his chest. I want to protect you, he said. You already do, she replied. Every time you show up. The next morning, Julian made a decision. He released a public statement, simple, direct, human, no lawyer speak, no PR fluff. I'm not hiding. I'm healing. I met a family that reminded me how to live again. Please let them live in peace. The media spun it in every direction. Some mocked, some praised. But eventually, the noise settled. Maple Ridge grew quiet again, and life, miraculously, kept going. But inside the tiny apartment with the peeling wallpaper and the drawings taped to the fridge, something had shifted forever, not because of money or headlines or attention, because of the choice they kept making every single day. To stay, to trust, to build something new, even if it wasn't perfect, even if it wasn't easy, even if the world didn't understand. Because real families aren't built on names, they're built on presence. And love. Asterisk. The first snow fell softly that morning. Tiny white flakes dusted the rooftops of Maple Ridge, settling gently on sidewalks and parked cars, covering the world in quiet wonder. The town always felt different when it snowed, like it paused for a breath, as if holding something sacred in the stillness. Julian stood by the window, sipping his coffee, watching Ellie and Emma make snow angels in the front yard. Their laughter danced through the cold air like music, warm and alive. It had been 6 months since the article, 6 months since his life unraveled in the most beautiful way. He'd never imagined this kind of peace, this kind of chaos, this kind of love. He thought success meant silence, solitude, the top of a lonely hill. But these two girls, and their mother, had rewritten that story without even trying. Now every morning started with small footsteps racing across the floor, cereal bowls clinking, and questions like, can we build a snowman today, or do penguins have best friends? And Julian had learned to answer them. That afternoon, Ivy found him in the kitchen surrounded by flour and a mess of cookie dough. She laughed when she saw him. You do know there's a store that sells cookies already made, right? He grinned. But those don't have your mom's secret cinnamon. You remembered that? I remember everything about you, he said, not as a line, but as the plain truth. She stopped, looked at him, and in the soft silence that followed, something unspoken passed between them. Something true, something earned. Later that night, as the snow thickened, Julian tucked the girls into bed. Ellie asked him to read her favorite story, the one about the two stars that get lost and find each other again in the dark. When he finished, Emma whispered, Julian, yeah, are we your real family now? He blinked. His heart swelled. You've been my family since the first time you hugged me at the bus stop, he said. Even if we don't match? Ellie asked, yawning. Especially because you don't match. That's what makes us special, Emma smiled. Already drifting to sleep, okay, good night, Dad. The word hung in the air. She hadn't said it by mistake. He stayed still for a long moment, not wanting to break the spell. Good night, he whispered back. When he returned to the living room, Ivy was waiting. She called you Dad, she said softly. I know, he said, and I didn't want to correct her. Ivy walked to the small bookshelf by the window and pulled out a thin, worn folder. What's that? He asked. She held it out. The girl's file from social services, from years ago. I kept it all this time. Julian opened it slowly. Inside were documents, photos, evaluations. His eyes fell on a crayon drawing a house with 4 stick figures, one tall, one with curly hair, and 2 little ones with big, smiling faces. It was signed, Our Family. Someday. They've always wanted this, Ivy said. A home. A real one. Someone who chooses them. I choose them, Julian said without hesitation. And what about me? She asked, the words quiet but bold. I chose you the moment I saw you hug Emma, like she was the most precious thing in the world. Her eyes filled. You really mean it, don't you? I do. Outside. The snow still fell. Inside. A miracle. Unfolded without noise or cameras. The next day, Julian drove to the county clerk's office with the girl's file in his coat pocket. When he got home, Ivy was waiting by the door. Where'd you go? He handed her a paper. I started the process. I want to adopt them if you'll let me. Tears welled in her eyes. They'll be over the moon. I was thinking, he added, almost shy, maybe we could all share the same last name someday. Ivy looked at him, then nodded, smiling through tears. Let's start with one beautiful step at a time. That evening, they sat together on the porch, wrapped in a blanket, watching the twins build a snow fort. Julian held Ivy's hand and whispered, you know, I thought I had everything once, money, power, a future designed to impress, but I never really had a home until now. Ivy leaned her head on his shoulder. Welcome home, Julian. From inside the house, the lights glowed warm. And outside, in the snow, 2 little girls laughed louder than the wind. They didn't know what tomorrow would bring, but they knew deep in their bones that they were loved, that they belonged, that the man they once asked, will you be our dad, had answered in every way that mattered. With his presence. With his heart. With forever. And that was the most beautiful love story of all.